And that'll happen down at the bottom portion of this project. So I'll turn off this background. Let's pretend like there's no text on there, and I'll move it out of the way. Whenever you add text to it, of course it has to have a text frame. And so this is what it would look like. One thing that you can do if you want to just see what your text would look like and you want to add some dummy text, just some random words or something simple, and you don't want to type out either random letters or copy and paste a sentence, you can go up to Type and down to Fill with Placeholder Text. Placeholder text, dummy text, sometimes you'll call it here called lorem ipsum, all is the same thing, and it just fills it with, usually it's Italian or Greek, random words. Doesn't necessarily mean anything or have to mean anything. By the way, if you in InDesign, if you hold down the Command key whenever you choose placeholder text, you can actually, oops, let me try that again. You can actually tell it what kind of placeholder text you wanted to. So if you wanted to fill it full of Hebrew text, there it is right there, and that's able to do that. Sometimes that comes in handy. But what I like to do is I'll fill it with placeholder just to see how many words or what size fits best with this. This especially looks good if you're trying to do a newspaper layout and your editor needs to know how many words can fit in an article area. But everything's filled up in this text box, and so with it I can start to select and edit the text that I have. Some of the most common ones, of course, you're changing your font type to a different style of font, or you're changing your font size. The other kinds of editing techniques delve a little bit deeper into the minutia of being a graphic designer. Small little things that actually make your designs look better or can change up the whole layout of it. The first thing is, what if I wanted to increase some spacing between the lines of the text that I have? Right now, you can see if I was to type it out and hit return, there's a set amount of space. If I hit a double return, it'll give me double that space. That spacing is known as the leading distance of it. Back in the olden days, with the first typesetting that was done, if you were to lay out each individual letter and then you wanted to put space between two different lines of type, you would do a strip of lead that would space out all the characters, and that's what's called leading. Leading up here is found underneath your font size, and you can see the little icon. It's got an A on top of an A. If you increase it, you can see it will actually space out and give you that particular distance between the two different lines. And even if I hit return, it'll automatically give me that same distance between that. The thing to know about leading is usually the number that's closest to the font size. So if I was to set this to 15, usually that's about right. But watch what happens if I keep it at 15 and I change my font size itself. I start making it larger. Eventually, if I kept it at 15 point, and made it larger, my text is going to start running into each other. So as you increase your size of your type, you also want to increase the size of your leading. By default, rather than choosing a number, if you choose auto, the computer will automatically pick a number. In this case, 36 point actually looks better. That will automatically increase or decrease as I change the size of my font as well. So by default, usually you keep it on auto. Sometimes you want to have more or less just to fit things in a particular area. The other thing that you can change is your tracking or your kerning of a paragraph. I'm going to select all of this first paragraph. Tracking simply is the distance between all of the letters that are in the area you have selected, the paragraph selected. The tracking here is the little V and A at the bottom. And by default it's set to 0, but if I increase my tracking, you can see it spreads it apart, or I can bring it back together and do negative tracking and bring them in. If you're ever reading a newspaper or a magazine, some of the things that graphic designers look for is they never want to have like maybe 1 or 2 words at the bottom of a paragraph. You want to either increase or decrease your tracking size to push or pull words together. Those are called widows and orphans. The other thing that you can do is adjust your kerning. Now this is more of a small, minute detail. I'll zoom in on this. Oh, hang on, I lost my place. Let's zoom in on that first couple of letters. Kerning, like tracking, deals with the distance between letters, but it's only the distance between 2 specific letters. And so this would be the kind of thing that you normally adjust on a logo or a headline of type, not necessarily a whole body of type. I'll select this. Let's set my tracking back to 0. If I do a V and an A, right now you can see there's a little bit of an overlap between the V and the A. And if I put my cursor between the two, you can see there's the horizontal. So the V goes over this way and the A is right there on the edge. The kerning up here, right now I can see it's set to 99. If I set it to optical, oh, it didn't even change it up at all, not much. Let's do it to 0. Bingo. So there's a 0 kerning, and you can see right there along my insertion point, it's perfectly spaced. Right at the end of that V is where the A starts. Ideally, visually, you want the same amount of space between these two letters and the next two letters that are with it. So if I've got two letters that are at a slant, I want to bring them closer together. This is where kerning comes in. By decreasing it, that actually visually looks a whole lot better than having it evenly spaced apart. This is one of those things that you don't do it very often. Like I said, you usually do it on logos or small, minute things. The main difference that you need to know is the difference between kerning and tracking. Kerning deals with two individual letters versus tracking, which is over the entire selection or entire body of text that you're working with. Final things. Other things that you can change up, let's choose our type tool, are found over here under your paragraph type of styles. So if I wanted to give a first line indent, if I wanted to indent the first line of every paragraph, this is what this one comes in. Usually if you're working in Microsoft Word, you'd hit tab or you would set a tab at the top. This way I can actually set my first line to be indented. Or I can give it right indent and I can give it a negative first line, and so this is what's called a hanging indent where it tabs over this way. Set those back to 0. Other things like giving it left indent, or set that to 0 first. Or adding space before or after a paragraph can also be done up here. Here's space, there it is, before a paragraph. So you can see it gives a little bit of space, but it doesn't adjust my lighting with that. All of that's found up there. Let's do some more fun things with it. These are kind of small details that come in with body copy. The book is going to have you break up a set of text into multiple different frames. Here's what's going on with that. Right now I've got a lot of text that doesn't fit into this one frame. I know this because I've got a little red X at the bottom out port is what it's called. If I was to make another frame, let's make this even smaller. In this case it's actually going to have you create a small one, I believe 2 mid-sized ones in the middle. And then we'll even do one here at the bottom. I can have my text flow from one frame to another frame by clicking on the bottom insertion point or the out port. It's going to follow my cursor until I click onto another frame. And I can do this over multiple frames. So it's flowing from here to here, and from here to here, and then here down to my last point as well. If I wanted to select my text, I can still highlight all of it. It still runs together. And I can even change the size of it and do the change up as well. If I was to change the size of a frame, the text would flow naturally as well. If I made one larger, it would pull text from the next frame that's over. This is most used in newspaper layout. If you ever see an article that starts on one page and then it jumps to an inside page or a back page, this is how they do it. They put your text in one frame, jump it to another frame from there. The other thing that you can do with it is let's place our text that we're working with. Just like you would place a picture into a frame, you can actually drop in or place in pre-existing text. In this case, we've got our surfing text. Text file right here. There's no formatting to it, it's just plain old text. Do open. You can see now it's being placed and flowing into here. What the book wants you to do is to tell it where to break each of your text. Rather than doing first thing I could do is I could do a variety of just returns and I could push it over to the area. Or I could tell it specifically where to break from this. To do this, let me zoom in. We're going to do what's called a special character insertion. I'm going to put my cursor right here at the end of this one. Under type, we can insert a break character. It's a different kind of breaks. In our case, we want to break it into the next frame. So everything that was after that insertion point breaks to right here. Now I still have my paragraph return. One of the things the book's going to ask you to do is to hit the forward delete to delete it away. If you don't know where that is, and most people ask about it, the forward delete is the one that's above your arrow keys on your keyboard. Do y'all see it? It's the delete button. It's got the forward arrow key. Instead of deleting everything that's behind it, the backspace, it deletes everything that's in front of it. So get rid of that. Again, we can break up the rest of it from here. So we got all of this. Let's see. Santa Barbara, place an insertion point there. We'll break it, type. Other kinds of breaks, if I want to break it to another page or to the next odd or even page, I can do that as well. Even if I have columns of text, I can break a column someplace differently. In this case, we're just doing the frame breaks. Insertion point, type. Do a frame break and everything's placed in there. Once it's in its own frame, it's simply a matter of selecting your text and doing the formatting within that particular text. It's still all connected, all the same. Make it larger. By the way, the keyboard shortcut to increase or decrease text is the shift command and the greater and less than signs on your keyboard. Let's see, what font were they using? ATC Garnet? If you didn't want to make your text all caps or something else, there is another quick formatting. So there's one way of doing it in all caps. Here's one way of spreading it out over the entire text string would be to increase your leading of that. Again, selecting the next paragraph, go through, restyle it, place your breaks wherever you need it to be from there. The last thing I want to show you is actually doing type that's along a path. We'll do this up at the top. Turn back on our background layer. Type on a path works with, first of all, drawing off a vector path from here. I'll move that out of the way. We need to start off by drawing a vector line. As with an Illustrator, you've got a pen tool. And the pen tool works pretty much the same way in InDesign. Start off with a single point. When you click and drag, you get your Bezier handles, and you can draw off the curvature of the line that you have. I can hold down my Option key and actually change up the curves and match it a little bit better. However, to type along this path, rather than using the regular type tool, they've got another type tool, Type on a Path tool, that lets you hover over and click on the path that you want. When it does this, it gives me my insertion point right there, and I can type out the text that I need. So April 13th through. As with the other one, I can highlight it. I can change the size of it. I can even change the placing and font of it. ATC medium. Let's get it a little bigger. One thing to notice, I drew off my line and it has that magenta little line to it. My type is in solid black, but in order to get rid of the line, I need to change my line color that I have. If you look up here at the top, still in magenta. If I set it to none, it goes away. Now all I see is this. One thing the book doesn't do is get you to change up what you can do with curved type that's on a path. Let me show you this. I've got it selected. If I go to Type, Type on a Path will give you a few more options that lets you stylize the type that's on your path. Specifically, how will the letters curve along that path. By default, it's set to rainbow, so in other words, it'll just spread itself across kind of naturally. But if I set to skew, it'll give me letters that will look like this. They'll skew themselves based on the curve, or it'll do a 3D rainbow. I've never had to use that before. Stair steps, sometimes I'll use that. Usually the rainbow is what I have. One thing that I do often will use is if I need to flip it, if I don't want it to go on this side of my line, but the other side, choosing flip will allow me to place the insertion point on the opposite side and go the other way as well. Other little things you can play around with, but that's the basics of using that. You say OK, and it'll lock it in, then you can go back and reformat from this. The last thing I want to show you, when you turn this project in, you do need to save it as a PDF. To do this, do not, well, first of all, you do need to save your file you're working on, but this will save the InDesign file. You can't make a PDF from the save or save as. Notice the formats down here don't even give you the option. Instead, you need to export as a PDF. Go to File, there are some pre-made ones, or if you go to Export, this will bring up your, your PDF options. You do need to give it a name, but here's my format as a PDF. We'll replace the one I've already made. And then it's going to ask you to go through the options for saving that PDF. That PDF is what you're going to upload to Moodle when you're finished. You don't have to print this one, but the PDF needs to be uploaded, and the book will go through the whole process of making and working through that. All cool? Any questions or any issues people have run into so far? Alrighty then, I'll turn your computer and let y'all continue working through this.